All right. I believe we are live. I think we're good to go. Check one, two. Yeah, I think we got audio. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. There's nobody here yet because we just got started. I'm going to share it in the Discord real quick. Today, we are talking about the topic. Let me make sure I get to the top of my notes here. The topic today is why your D&D game feels flat and how to fix it. Okay. And so we're going to be talking about this. Give me just a moment. Let me share this in my Discord real quick. Make sure people know that I'm going live. Okay. All right. So this is an important topic, and I love talking about this. I have talked about this a lot, and I hope that this is helpful to people. But we don't want our games to feel flat. We don't want them to fall flat. We want them to be invigorating, fun. We want players to be really immersed, really engaged in our games that we're running. As game masters, which by the way, the mission of this channel is to empower game masters to run better games. So if that sounds like the mission for you, friend, you're in the right place. But here's the thing. Keeping your D&D game from falling flat doesn't rely on rules mastery. A lot of people think it does, but this is actually not the truth. It's about experience design. Okay. Flat games are almost never caused by mechanics. It's almost never caused by the GM not understanding mechanics. Sometimes a D&D game can feel kind of flat and can fall a little flat if the players or the GM take a lot of time trying to find how to rule mechanics. Like, so for example, if nobody knows how any spells work or anything, you have to pause to look things up. This can make the game fall a little flat. But this is not that by a vast margin, not the number one way that games tend to fall flat. A lot of times, if a D&D game or a TTRPG game falls flat, this is caused by missing emotional narrative or player agency signals. Okay. Emotional narrative and player agency signals. These are the reasons. Missing these things is the reason for why games fall flat. And I have a key line written down here. Most D&D games don't fail because of dice. They fail because of invisible design problems that happen at the emotional level, guys. And the case in point is if the players don't care emotionally, it's going to feel flat. If they don't care psychologically, it's going to feel flat. If they're not truly invested in telling the story of their player character, it's going to fall flat, guys. So, what are the symptoms of a flat game? Let's go over this just a little bit. Players checking their phones while they're there at the table. Combat feels like doing chores. It just seems boring. Everyone seems bored. Nobody role plays unless you kind of like force them to. After you give a description or you deliver a monologue, it's just quiet, and you're even questioning whether or not people are paying attention. Players don't pursue goals or seem to care about goals. Sessions feel forgettable afterward, and you might even find yourself wondering, why did they come? Like, I don't know why they keep showing up to D&D. Is it just because they have nothing better to do? These are questions you may ask yourself after realizing that your session has fallen flat. Everyone is polite but disengaged. This is another symptom of a flat game. I noticed there's some people coming into the stream. Welcome. It's great to have you. Drop a comment. Let me know how you're doing today. Let me know if you can hear the audio. I think it's going good, but I just like to double check and make sure. And just to reiterate, today the topic is why your D&D game feels flat and how to fix it. That's what we're talking about today. All right. So we just talked about the symptoms, okay? Oh, Dungeons and 20s. Howdy. How's it going, William? Great to see you. So we just went through the symptoms, okay? Now let's talk about the 5 core causes. What causes D&D games to feel flat, okay? And I think that this is often misdiagnosed. And I think a lot of times it's very hard for game masters to diagnose their own flat games, the problems leading to it. Because if you knew beforehand, well, you would have fixed it, right? So we don't know what we don't know. This makes it difficult. But one of the biggest reasons for games falling flat in my experience is no emotional stakes. And that means nothing emotionally matters to the players, which I've pretty much already said at this point a couple times, but it's so important. Are there any motivating factors for them? Do the PCs care about anything going on in the game? Do they have things they can lose that actually matter to them? This all starts at the beginning of the game, guys. This starts when you first sit down and you play the first session. And your players, if they're sitting down to play a game of D&D, I fully believe that for the vast majority of players, in the vast majority of situations, you have a real opportunity to get buy-in from your characters. You have a very real opportunity to get them engaged, to get them to want to be in it. They're not sitting down to play D&D probably because they just randomly were like, my life is so boring, I'm going to go play D&D. They're probably playing D&D because there's some element within them that wants to create, that wants to tell a story, that wants to take part in this social, creative adventure with other players. So it's really important to understand that we have this great opportunity at the beginning of the campaign in the very first session. And it may start in session 0, but honestly, it starts when the gameplay starts. Because session 0 isn't a requirement to get emotional buy-in from your players. Really, once they enter the world, there's an opportunity for them to feel like the world is alive. There's an opportunity for them to feel like the world is dynamic and that their choices matter and that they have agency and that they have freedom to create story within this game. And the more you nurture that and the more they come to actually care about what's going on, see, this all starts at the beginning. We don't just throw flat things out there and then expect for them to care about it. We roll these things out gradually. Story, NPCs, villains, animal companions, interesting arcs, interesting adventures, ancient ruins that they can explore, magical items they can find. There are so many opportunities to put things in the game in front of the player characters that they might come to really value emotionally. And that's how we get them to buy in. That's how we get them to care. And that's the very first that's the very first way, the very first opportunity we have to get players to engage in the game, which will lead to a game not feeling flat because they will care. That's the opposite of falling flat, is caring. William says emotional conflict without escalation is usually the main issue, anchored to what is important to the PCs, thus the player. Okay, so emotional conflict without escalation is usually the main issue. Okay. Emotional conflict without escalation is the main issue, anchored to what is important to the PCs, thus the player. Okay, got you. So in other words, emotional conflict, but if it doesn't escalate, this is an issue. I think that this is a great way to describe it. I think I agree. It's really important that how can I say this? It's really important that we give a reason for emotional conflict to matter. And I want to take it to the level before this. You might say, well, I tried to put emotional conflict in there, right? But if you don't have things that the players care about, emotional conflict is not going to matter so much. Hello, Blue Rose Line. Great to see you. William says, story usually can only move forward through conflict, but that conflict has to be important to the player. Yes, 100%. That is, I think, that's actually the golden ticket right there. I really believe that is true. Story usually can only move forward through conflict. And the conflict can take many forms. It could be combat, it could be like learning new things and finding out there's a conspiracy. It could be exploring abandoned ruins and there are dangerous things in there. It could be that there's an NPC who has it out for your character and they're trying to get you arrested. This could be so many things. But then that's how we create story. And as Stephen King used to say, make sure there's conflict on every page, or at your D&D table, make sure there's conflict in every scene, in every arc, right? Blue Rose Lion, it is great to see you. Happy to see you on the live stream today. So no emotional stakes is one of the 5 core causes of a game falling flat. Let's talk about the second one. Player agency is too weak. If players are only reacting and they're not given power to actually progress their destiny, like through agency, through free will, the game's going to start to feel railroaded. Like players, it's often said players don't want to be a spectator to your novel. They want to tell the story proactively of their player characters. And I believe this. I think that the best way for a game master to empower players to care is to give them agency, give them the ability to create story that they care about. And in fact, it's almost like a cheat code. Watch what players do, watch what they want to do, watch what they gravitate toward. When you say to them, okay, you guys can do whatever you want, you've just come into town. What do you want to do? You're going to find that they're going to probably gravitate toward the things that interest them. And it's in your best interest as a GM to pay attention to that, staying focused on this. Watch how the player characters act, and then you react to that, have the world react, instead of you trying to push story on them constantly, right? Let them show you the direction, and then you quickly fill that. You generate the world in that direction. I believe that this is core to keeping your games from falling flat. I believe this is really important. Now, I want to move on here and talk about the third thing that can make games feel flat: scenes that lack pressure. Okay. So this could be scenes that have no urgency, right? No conflict at all, no stakes in the story. Dirty Socks is in the house. Hey, what are we doing? We're having a live stream. I'm trying to get back into live streaming. Don't have a scheduled time yet, but by the end of February, that'll change. I'm going to establish a regular daily live streaming time. But right now, we're flexing live stream muscles, getting back in the game. Getting back in the game. It's great to see you. Great to see so many awesome people in the chat. Love seeing the homies, the friends, the compatriots, fellow warriors on this journey of empowering game masters to run better games. Now, scenes that lack pressure can make your games fall flat. What does this mean? So a scene can be one of two things. A scene could be a part of the story, and that's a key thing. This is when it's going good. It's a part of the story, a part that matters. How do we know if it matters? Because it matters to someone at the table, at least one player character, preferably more. And even if it matters to the GM, but honestly, that's not as important as having it matter to the player characters, because they are actually the tellers of the tale. They're actually the authors. They are co-authoring with you, the GM, but it's in your best interest for them to be pumped rather than for you to be pumped. You do have to be pumped, but if you're pumped and all of your players are not pumped, you're going to very quickly not be pumped. You're going to quickly fall flat and be like, this is rough, man. Nobody cares about my game. No one cares about the game I'm trying to run. It's a much better situation to have the players all pumped, and then you get pumped because your players are pumped. But there are two kinds of scenes. There are the kinds of scenes that do matter to the story, and hence they will matter to one or more players. And then there are scenes that actually don't matter to anyone. And they might just be filler, that everyone might be bored. Everyone might be like, this is not a useful part of the story. Why are we doing this? Are we just wasting time here? These kinds of scenes will have a tendency to make your game feel flat. Because what is it? A scene that isn't a meaningful part of the story for someone is just time spent going through something that nobody cares about. William says, scenes are the meat of the story. Each choice in the scene should have pressure. I like to see what happens when they succeed, but sometimes I forget to add that pressure for what they do. Solve a problem, create a worse one, and keep the pressure going and create a crisis. Yes, that sounds like a spiral I could get behind. No, awesome. I completely agree. Scenes are the meat of the story. That is actually a big statement. I would like to ponder that for a minute. I think that that's right, because what is a scene? A scene is the view of the story narrative that you're all sharing together. And the reason your view is on this scene is because the scene is important to the story. Traditionally, that is what's going on. Now, as a game master, how much control do you have over this? You have a somewhat limited amount of control, in the sense that, when your player characters are acting doing things, making choices, going to the store, sharpening their blades, preparing their spells. Like when they're doing things, they're pushing the narrative, they're pushing the story forward. But what if you sense that a scene is starting to lose its value? What if the scene has already played itself out and it's starting to wane? And then you're like, okay, this scene isn't important anymore. It's time to change it. That's when I might say to my characters, okay, so, you guys have done these things. Do you want to skip, make a time jump, skip ahead a little bit? Or what would you all like to do now? Ushering in, let's change the scene, right? Are scenes the meat of the story? Yes, I do. I think they are the meat of the story. Dirty Sock says, what is your main to go, or I think go to scene description? And in what situation are you deploying this? To be honest, I haven't introduced it once before, so I'm very interested in this. What is your main go to scene description? That's actually a very interesting question. I think that for me, when I introduce a scene, when I usher in a scene, I think that I first of all describe what the characters would sense. So obviously, I try to go through the senses. It's usually, I would say sight first as a default, but that's not always true because the strangest thing will register first. The most noticeable thing. That might be what they see, or it might be like if it's dark outside, it might be what they hear, or it might be what they smell. For example, there's a scene at the beginning of the Darkest Dawn campaign, which, by the way, if anyone wants to play in one of my games, I've got new games up. Check my Start Playing Games listing. A bunch of new games, one shots in there. Escape the Time Rift one shot. I've got like a swamp cult game that I'm getting ready to do. I've got a pure theater of the mind game called The Shattered Crown of Vale Cresthold. I'm going back, guys. I'm starting to I'm transitioning back to pure theater of the mind. Don't worry, all my campaigns are not going back to pure theater of the mind, but I am launching one campaign that's going to have no VTT. It's going to be pure theater of the mind. If you're interested in stuff like that, you should check out my Start Playing Games. Join one of my games. Be awesome. Play awesome games with the awesome kids. Okay, so, but like there's a scene at the beginning of the Darkest Dawn campaign where the first thing the players come across is a soldier hanging from a tree with a rope around their neck, right? And one of the first things I describe is, you feel the wind and you hear the creaking of the rope hanging the soldier. And then I go on to describe what the soldier looks like. But the first sense that I use is the feeling, so touch, the wind against them, and then the sound, so audible, of the rope creaking as the soldier is swaying in the wind. So that's an example, Dirty Socks, of how I would launch into a scene. I'm not sure if that was your question, but good question. Garrick is in the house. How's it going, Garrick? Great to see you. Happy to have you in the live stream. Getting the crew back together here, the live stream crew. William says, every end of a scene should open doors for them to choose. Yes. Oh, absolutely. In fact, I hope players always feel like there's a choice. What can I do? I mean, obviously, there are times in the game when choices are limited. If you don't have a teleport spell, then, maybe door A or door B are your only legitimate choices, or turning around and going back where you came from, or just plopping down and setting up camp right now. Get a long rest in before you choose a door. Get your spell slots back. But there are still choices there. I love it when players fully utilize their choices. I never want to make them feel like, okay, that's the only choice you have. There's always another choice. There's always some kind of creative thing you can do. And I feel like my players are always super smart about this. They always find a way to find more options than I even pictured. But now, Garrick says, maybe the first thing they notice about the room is the 4 trolls charging toward them. Yes, I would highly suspect that would be the most noticeable thing that most players would see when they walk into a room that happens to have charging trolls. That would definitely get my attention. Very, very good. Okay, here's the fourth thing that can make your game feel flat and dull, that the characters aren't driving the story. Okay. Campaigns shouldn't be about plots, right? This might be a controversial thing to say, but they shouldn't be about plots. They should be about people. Which people are they about, right? The main characters are the player characters. So it's about them. You're essentially writing a book, creating a movie, creating a comic book, however you want to think of it, in an ephemeral intellectual format where you are all speaking it into existence and you're all visualizing it at the same time in your own unique ways. So it's happening in everyone's mind, but it's a little different for every person. But the driver of the story is the characters. Think about some of the most interesting, think about some of the most interesting plots of all time, and then the stories about them. But they're always driven by a character. For example, one really interesting plot in a movie was in the movie Inglorious Bastards, the Quentin Tarantino movie, where they have a chance to kill Hitler, right? And they, there's this whole plot to, and so it's so like that is a plot, and that's a part of the story. But the magic of the story are the characters. Brad Pitt's character, right? The woman he meets at or the woman at the cinema, and there are these different character arcs going on, right? Um, William says no plot, but what about a controlling idea? Oh, interesting. Okay, I think when you say that, it makes me think about the theme of the campaign, right? Or the session or the even the scene. There's a theme, and here's what I describe. So, what about a controlling idea? So, what is plot from the character perspective? Plot is information fed to the characters as they discover things or see things or witness things. And then this strings along sort of like a plot line, series of events that may probably will be leading to something. But what is theme then? I would call theme a controlling idea. Why is it a controlling idea? Because every time I describe things as the GM, I want to run it through the theme filter. I use this a lot. So the theme filter maybe is like, if I'm running a grimdark campaign, then it's like gritty, dark, visceral. It's going to impact how I describe things like footsteps on creaking boards, or how I describe the sound of the blood splattering onto the ground after the sword goes through the enemy. I want to try to make it gritty, dirty, dark, terrible, right? So that's like the grimdark thing. You might have a different theme with your high fantasy game, or if your game is kid friendly, right? So it's like more like for younger audiences, then maybe the main idea is heroism. So what you're highlighting is in every moment is kind of like the light of the heroic character and how it impacts the darkness around them. So that might really impact the way you describe scenes, the way you usher in ideas, the way that people even experience the game from the narrative perspective of you telling them about the world. Flip Out, how's it going? Flip Out says, I feel like when I play, I'm either not proactive enough or taking too much spot. It's hard for me to find a balance. Take too much spotlight. It's always the better choice. Don't worry. If you're too much of a spotlight hog, your GM will have to figure out how to balance it. This is a good problem. Take that spotlight, Flip Out. Do not be don't go down the opposite road where you're not proactive enough, because then you might miss out on spotlight time that your character should have. It's challenging for the GM to bring proactive players out. It's a lot less challenging for them to move the spotlight from a spotlight hog, if that makes sense. Because when someone is hogging the spotlight, this is very noticeable, but it also tends to drive the story. That's my 2 cents. Go for that spotlight, Flip Out. And if you take up too much of it, it's your GM's issue. They'll sort it out. That's my take on it. I love it when players are proactive and act. William says, I was thinking about it as I am a big fan of character-driven stories, but it's all through webs of plots that they choose to go along with. I started noticing that I have a overall general plot. So I think when you say that, it makes me think there is a natural web of plots. There's always a natural web of plots in any setting. If there are people, if there are, things going on, then naturally there are going to be plots around them, and they're discovering those plots. William says, but usually with agency is actually not character driven, but personality display. Um, oh, with agency, it's usually not character driven, but personality display. Do you mean like personality of the player? That totally factors in. But I want to go back to this. I want to go back to this previous comment, which was I was thinking about it. I'm a big fan of character driven stories. Okay, yes, but it's all through webs of plots that they choose to go along with. I have started noticing that I have an overall general plot. Yes, this totally makes sense to me because if you think about it, anytime there are a lot of humanoid thinking, reasoning creatures in any kind of area, there are going to be plots, there's going to be drama. So the players are just discovering what's there. And then the agency part is whether or not they choose to embark on those plots that they discover. Um, but it's also true that the plots that you highlight are more likely to be plots that they decide to pursue. You're probably highlighting the most important plots, the most interesting plots for the story, maybe the plots that you would be passionate about them pursuing as a GM. So, for example, there might be a plot line where the local lord is oppressing the townsfolk. They are, their backs are broken under the laborious, just dreadful, painful existence they live, while the lord lives high on the hog and overtaxes them and beats them when they get out of line. So we have like a bully lord, almost like a Robin Hood type situation, right? Or there's the plot of little Jimmy keeps trying to cheat on his tests at school, and there's this constant game of cat and mouse he's playing with his teacher. This is also a plot going on, but which one is going to be of more interest to a band of adventuring, um, characters, heroic characters with magical abilities? They're probably going to be more interested in the Lord overthrowing the thing, but it also, or overthrowing the tyrannical Lord. But it also doesn't mean that they don't discover little Timmy's game of cat and mouse with his teacher, just as a happenstance. And it doesn't at all mean that they don't decide to pursue that plot. Both of those plots are real. Both are ushered in by the game master. Both are learned through just the acquisition of information as the player characters are going through the world. William says a general idea of the plot has to be used to bring that character out by pushing that pressure. I started noticing in my games. So what character is actually revealed? So that character is actually revealed in a way, kind of like that moral choice we had in our game with Carrion and Raphael. Oh yeah, no, totally. Plots, situations, these are the best ways to bring out character, to highlight character. And I mean, so if there was no conflict, there would be no story. But who engages in the conflict? It's always someone, the character. So in this case, it's the player characters, right? But then how does conflict come about? It comes about because there's friction. Like there's like idea friction or action friction, right? Like the Lord wants more gold and he wants to feed his people less and tax them more. But the people want to have more gold, less taxation. They want to live a better life, not have their backs broken by hard labor all the time. We have a friction of like ideas, a friction of motivations, a friction of literally plans and actions, right? And then when the player characters get in that mix, this reveals their character because they have to start choosing moral standing. They have to choose what they believe about the situation. And by the way, all of this makes for games that do not fall flat if your player characters care about the conflict. Yes, it brings out the character. It also makes the game feel fun and gives it meaning, actual meaning in the world. So yeah, no, totally. You're bringing out some great foundational recipe items that are crucial for GMs who want to get player characters to care, because without this intermingling of like conflict, character, the narrative struggle of navigating that conflict, the character traits that brings out, and the repercussions of it, and the agency to engage with it creatively. Without that little intersection of things, the game gets very boring very fast. William says, so I'm starting to think that there's a difference of plot versus railroading. Sometimes plot is getting confused with railroading. Yeah, no, I think you're right. Sometimes I think when GMs say plot, people are like, "You're railroading." Like it's almost like that word has been a little hijacked by the anti-railroaders. Garrick says, "Of course, plot is offered, railroad is man." I agree. I think that's a very practical way to say it. I really think that's a super practical way to say it. Um, there is a big difference between giving players the choice to opt into a plot or to take action in it, or even just showing it to them and then railroading them into pursuing it somehow. Obviously, railroading feels bad. Sometimes it has to happen a little bit, especially in a one shot, but it shouldn't happen too much. Shouldn't be such a big thing uh, that they have no other choice, because then you run the risk of them not liking the railroad. They don't care about it, and then your game falls flat. Hence the topic of today's video. So we need the characters to drive the story. If they don't do this, our games can fall flat. William says, there has to be some plot, otherwise nothing forces that decision. Scenes don't turn and values don't shift into that escalation. Oh, 100%, 100%. And if you think about it, there would never be a situation where there's no plot. And I guess when we use the word plot, what do I think about? I think of plots as interwoven social situations that will contain some conflict, they'll contain some motivations, they'll contain alliances and backstabby situations, the complex social web of the rationing conscious creatures that are connected to each other through various ways. And there are always going to be interesting plots. I was at work yesterday, and there's a whole situation at work about, like, they need to hire a new manager, but the ops manager is like micromanaging the store manager, basically deciding who she can hire for her shift managers. This is a plot. The plot here is the big boss is trying to force the store level boss to make choices that the store level boss does not feel are right for the store. What happens then? Well, what happens is now the store manager is compromised. They are forced into a decision that they didn't even believe in to begin with. And then when bad things happen, they have to take responsibility for it, but they didn't get the choice. This is a plot. Who's going to go on that adventure? Well, the store manager. It's going to be her adventure. Ultimately, she's the main character in that adventure. And then probably whatever manager she does hire, will they be chosen because of their merit and she believes that they deserve it? Or will they be chosen because bureaucratically they were selected by a higher up who doesn't really understand what's going on, and then they'll be ushered into that position? And now there's this whole arc where them and the store manager are going to have to work together, even though this person was chosen kind of bureaucratically, not directly as a result of what they could bring to the position. See, that these things get complicated really quick. These are all plots. And when we are shown these plots, we have a choice in how we act upon them, right? Somebody at the store hearing about this plot might decide, I want to be that manager. And they might call the ops manager and say, I want to be that manager. You should make me that manager. I'll be loyal to you. I'll help run the store the way you want it run. We can undercut the store manager together. All her bad choices can be minimized because you'll have an agent on the inside. See, now we have like a little subterfuge. There are alliances being brokered. This happens in the fantasy world all the time. Just the stakes are usually higher. It's like a dragon's going to actually burn people. It's going to actually crumble castles because they're mad, right? So this brings us to number 5. What's the final thing that can cause burnout, cause games to fall flat, that can cause games to be no fun, no emotional stakes? Well, It could be GM burnout, over control. One thing I like to say is that over prepping kills spontaneity. I know that this is kind of a hot topic. I know that people don't always agree with me when I say this. Some people, I think, believe that there's no such thing as over prepping. I agree with this as long as GMs are willing to sacrifice what they've prepped if the players go in a different direction or to like reinsert it later. The problem is when GMs try to stick too closely to what they've prepped at the expense of agency and improvisation. Personally, I love improvisation. I do realize improv has its limits, but there's also a magic energy to improv that adds fuel that gives you the quickest route to obvious player agency, like fallout. When players make choices that don't exactly align with what you had prepped, the best way to give them feedback about their choices is to improvise directly in the direction they're going in. Garrick says this: don't prep more than you are willing to forego. I totally agree. Now, with VTTs, it's a little, this is a little hard because having battle maps is actually a thing. William says, I'm such an over prep DM. I have things prepped in my world that no one is even close to being around. Okay, well, that may not be a bad thing at all, unless it leads to burnout, right? If the GM walks into the session burnt out, frustrated, they're not having fun, then this is going to lead to the session feeling flat. The players are going to pick up on this. Garrick says, me too, William. Yes. I have done this. I used to do this a lot. I used to prep so much. I actually used to spend 5 or 6 hours prepping for every session back in my mid 30s. No, it would have been my late 20s at this point. I used to prep a lot and I liked it, but I realized that I had a tendency to try to railroad toward the stuff I had prepped. The same thing can happen if you're, I think, running a module. And that's one of the hardest things about modules is that you can be tempted to try to railroad toward the stuff written. What happens when players go places that weren't written out in the module? William says, the Dark Lands for the Orc Union, different story for sure. I had to prep before every session since I never did that one. Yeah. So that's actually sometimes, prep, I think Garrick has said this before. The best way to improvise is to like prep everything you can and then improvise where you need to. Just be willing to improvise. That's the magic. So when people say there's no such thing as over prepping, I agree. As long as it's not leading to burnout and as long as you're okay with stepping away from it, if the players don't go in that direction. Garrick says, but I had this great arc the players didn't care about. Yes. Yes, I understand. So, and here's why I'm talking about this. This is the only reason this matters in the context of this video is because if over prepping leads to GM burnout, it's way better for the GM to show up with a little bit of prep, ready to improv, and maybe the exact tactile details of the game are a little wonky, but the GM is having a lot of fun. They're giving the players agency. The players are caring about the plot arcs. Yeah, so maybe that NPC has changed names a couple times because no one remembers what the heck their name was because it wasn't prepped out. It was completely improvised. And the belief was it was going to be a throwaway. I've had this happen many times. I've literally just improvised a thing, didn't think it was going to matter. 10 levels later, that thing's still walking around and now it's part of the party. And I'd never prepped any of it. And that's so much fun. But see, this is so much better if we're enjoying it than over prepping, burning yourself out. Best case scenario is you prep forever. You have prep for days and days, but then you come into the story, you're willing to improv when needed, but you have all this great prep and you're happy and it feels good and you care about the story and you're not burnt out at all. Like obviously that's the best case scenario, but we live in a real world and there are limits to everything. Some of us are limited on time. Some of us are limited on creative energy. Some of us struggle to find time to prep more than a few things. Then the question is, well, what should I prep? This is a whole nother thing. William says, so my world prob, I think I think you meant prep, um, is that the lore is there, each major point where players arrive, open choices by hearing the rumors there, and then they can choose to follow for an adventure. But if not, they can follow their own path that the characters are on. Yeah, no, for sure. William, I think your world feels very prepped to me. It also feels very immersive and alive, and I think, and it's so cool. Like there's the stuff that's going on is actually interesting to me as a player because I mean, I love high fantasy tropes. I love fantasy worlds. I love learning and discovering things. And even if my character would know a thing, there's still a fun part of me discovering it as a player, witnessing it in the story for the first time. It's so much fun. So your world is very immersive. It feels very prepped. William says lots of progress clocks always running in the background. Yes. That's a lot of work going into that too, which makes me wonder if you ever get burnt out on those things. You may be fueled by those things, or you may think, oh, this is a lot to track. It gets a little mentally tiring. I don't know how you think about that. Excel works great. Yes. I heard someone say the other day, one of the greatest capacities of the human ability to progress is not necessarily that we're so intelligent, but that we very intelligently use tools and farm out tasks to those tools. Excel can be a brilliant tool for tracking things like progress clocks. Anyway, all right. So if we can fix these issues, we can stop our sessions from falling flat. We can stop our games from being games nobody cares about. Garrick says, in mind, there is a mix of things that stay static until the party touches it, and other things that progress at their rate regardless. Yeah, that's realistic. I think I love it. I love things like that, especially in those rare cases where players leave, it progresses by itself, and then they come back and they see the progress, especially if they influenced it. That's really awesome. William says, working on a progress AI to build to help me. Oh, heck yeah. Offloading some of that GM thinking work to the AI bots and agents. I believe in this very much. But anyway, all right. Well, that's going to conclude our live stream for today. I should probably go work on editing the video I filmed earlier. I filmed a video about homebrew spells, how to build them, how to make them balanced, what to look for, what to avoid. Very excited to get that video out. I give a few examples of homebrew spells, including an example from the most recent Discord content creation contest, the homebrew spell contest. The winning example I feature in this video, and I talk about why it's a balanced spell. It actually was a really balanced spell. It was a very well crafted homebrew spell. For those of you who are not a member of the Discord, please make sure that you join us. Link to the Discord is in the description. We're almost 600 Game Masters strong. I didn't see this comment above from MP Convake. Great. I'm way too into the rabbit hole that YouTube suggests live session of a DM. I don't know if they meant that as a good thing or a bad thing, but yes, you are apparently way down the rabbit hole on YouTube. Anyway, so with that being said, guys, we're going to call that a wrap on this one. Make sure you join the Discord if you haven't. Make sure that you check out my games. Start playing. Link is in the description if you want to join one of my games. I have some one-shots, so you can check it out. Also have some longer campaigns going on in there. And and PC Convake, good thing, I guess. That's good. I'm glad it's a good thing. Maybe, sort of. At least it's not an immediate negative. And yeah, all right, guys, have a great one. Roll some D100s for me at your next game. I'll see you awesome people on the next one. Thank you for hanging out in this live stream.